The air hung thick and heavy, a blanket of humidity clinging to the small town of Havenwood. It was the kind of day where the cicadas sang their ceaseless song, filling the air with their drone. In the stillness of Thomas Greaves' cabin, an old harmonica lay abandoned on the rough-hewn table. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight that pierced the gloom, undisturbed by any breath. Thomas himself was out in the woods, his weathered face creased in concentration as he tracked a wounded deer. His movements were those of a man born to the wild, his every sense attuned to the rhythms of the forest. But his mind was far from the hunt, replaying a memory from the previous day. It had been a chance encounter, a twist of fate that brought a young woman to his doorstep. Her appearance so startling that it seemed like a figment of his sun-baked imagination. Nobody knew how long she had been lying there, half buried in dirt, wrapped in torn rags, looking more like a ghost unearthed than someone alive. He remembered the exact moment when he first saw her, the way the sunlight glinted off something amidst the trees. At first he thought it was discarded blankets or old supplies. His horse snorted, rearing back. Curiosity piqued, he dismounted, his hand instinctively reaching for the revolver at his hip. As he drew closer, the stench hit him first. Sweat, blood, something rotting in the sun. Then he saw her twitch, a faint whimper escaping her dry lips. A girl, maybe 20, maybe younger. Her face was swollen, lips split, dress shredded. Dirt crusted her skin. One eye barely open, the other staring past him into the endless blue. "Please, don't touch me," she rasped. Dry words, but sharper than a bullet. Thomas didn't flinch. He looked at her, noting the bruises, the ribs pressing through her skin, her fingers clutching the blanket like a lifeline. In that moment, he could have ridden away. Nobody would have blamed him, but he didn't. As he carefully unwrapped the blanket, revealing the extent of her battered body, a surge of protectiveness coursed through him. Gently, he removed his coat, wrapped her body, and lifted her into his arms. She felt fragile, like a bird with a broken wing, and he carried her back to his horse with the utmost care. The ride to his cabin was quiet, just the creak of leather and the distant call of a crow. In that silence, something stirred inside Thomas, long thought dead. That night, he kept a vigil by her side, not knowing what the next day would bring. As the fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the rough wooden walls, Thomas watched over her, his heart heavy with a mix of emotions. Sleep evaded him. Instead, he found himself thinking back over his life to a time when his own heart wasn't encased in so much ice. When the first rays of dawn crept through the window, he noticed something stirring beside him. The girl, he realized, was sitting up, her eyes wide and unblinking, her gaze fixed on some unseen point beyond the wall. Startled, Thomas sat up, his hand instinctively moving to his gun. But then he saw that she wasn't a threat. She was just as broken and afraid as the day he found her. Still clutching the blanket, she looked at him, her eyes searching his face. He saw fear there, yes, but also a flicker of trust, a silent plea for help. And in that moment, Thomas knew what he had to do. He spent the day preparing food and water. By nightfall, she still hadn't touched either, but a flicker of life had returned to her eyes. On the second day, she ate nothing, but at least she drank a little water. Thomas didn't press her. He let her rest, speaking to her softly, telling her of the world outside these four walls. He read to her from his well-worn books, hoping to bring a semblance of normalcy to this strange situation. By the third day, however, she showed signs of returning strength. She ate half a biscuit, spoke 7 words that changed everything. They were hunting animals, but they caught me instead. Those words, spoken in a voice hoarse from disuse, opened a floodgate. Over the next few days, she shared her story, fragmented, painful, heartbreaking. And as she spoke, Thomas pieced together the grim picture of her ordeal. She'd been taken by a group of men known only as the Hunters. Her captor, a man named Silas, held a particular fascination for Thomas. Something in his tone, something in his demeanor when he spoke of the man sent a chill down Thomas's spine. Danger, it seemed, wasn't done with her yet. That week, he found cut fence wire, saw unknown boot prints outside the barn, discovered a crow nailed to a post, its beady eyes staring accusingly at the sky. One night he saw a lone rider atop the ridge overlooking his property. His horse whinnied, pawing the ground nervously. And in the morning, his faithful dog was found poisoned, lying stiffly by the creek. "They know I'm here," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror, and Thomas knew he couldn't protect her forever. He needed help, but who could he turn to? The local law was corrupt, their hands tied by the very men who were after her. Taking matters into his own hands, he reached out to an old friend, Sheriff Brody, a man he could trust, a man who lived and died by his own code of honor. They met at a secluded crossroads, far from prying ears and eyes. Thomas spoke in hushed tones, laying out the facts as he knew them. The sheriff listened intently, his face grim. "I'll get my men ready," he finally said, his voice grave. "But remember, Thomas, we can't act without proof, without evidence." Thomas nodded, understanding the limitations of the law. Patience was a virtue, but it was a virtue he rarely possessed. Days stretched into a tormenting wait, each tick of the clock echoing the pounding of his heart. During that time, he found himself drawn to Clara, not just because of the dangers she faced, but because of the strength he saw in her, the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. They worked side by side around the house, finding solace in the mundane tasks that gave structure to their days. Then one evening, as the firelight danced in her eyes, she smiled, a real smile that reached up to her eyes, chasing away the shadows of fear that had clung to her for so long. "You didn't save me," she said softly, "but you stayed." And in that moment, Thomas knew she was right. He hadn't rescued her from her captor, but he had offered her something perhaps even more precious, a safe haven, a moment's peace. And as the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened, nurtured by shared silences and unspoken understanding. The town folks, ever curious, began to call her Clara Greaves. No wedding dress, no ceremony, no grand gesture. Names, Thomas had always believed, come from who you choose to stand beside. And as he stood beside Clara day after day, the name fit her like a glove. One crisp autumn morning, trouble arrived. Hooves pounded on the dry earth, kicking up a cloud of dust that swallowed 3 men riding hard. Tall and dusty, their faces grim, their eyes hard and cold. No words were exchanged as they spurred their horses forward, their silhouettes stark against the darkening sky. The first man, his face partly covered by a wide-brimmed hat, spat on the ground. "We're here for what's ours." Thomas, alerted by the commotion, stood at the door with rifle in hand, Clara at his side, her eyes wide with fear. He didn't need to hear their words twice. The men moved like predators, their gazes predatory, their hands twitching as if accustomed to the feel of weapons, but Thomas was ready. In the ensuing struggle, Thomas fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, his movements swift and sure, guided by adrenaline and years of survival instincts. His rifle barked, sending one of the men crashing to the ground. But there were 2 more, and he soon found himself outnumbered, outgunned. Just when he thought all hope was lost, he heard a shot. Startled, he glanced back to see the second man crumple, clutching his shoulder, a smoking pistol at his feet. Another shot rang out, and the third man, the leader, staggered, clutching his arm, his face contorted in pain. From the doorway, Clara emerged, her eyes blazing with newfound determination. She stepped over the fallen man, her gaze unwavering. "Get out," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. The injured man snarled, but the sight of the 2 guns pointed at him quelled his bravado. He turned and limped away, disappearing into the swirling dust. As the men rode off, Thomas and Clara stood side by side, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, their eyes locked on the retreating figures. In that moment, they knew that this was just the beginning of a much bigger fight.